Imagine waking up in the middle of the night. The fire is gone. Not getting low. Not burning weak. Gone. Outside, the temperature is dropping fast. The wind is ripping across the frozen landscape. Your children are huddled together, trying to stay warm. And there's no lighter, no matches, no gas stove, no heated house waiting for you. Just darkness, snow, and cold. For an Ice Age family, losing fire wasn't simply inconvenient. It could become a fight for survival. But here's the crazy part. How did ancient humans actually deal with this? Did they panic? Did they simply freeze? Or did they have ways of surviving that modern people might completely overlook? Tonight, we're going back thousands of years to the moment when one tiny flame could mean the difference between comfort and disaster. Picture a small Ice Age camp. A family has spent hours gathering wood, preparing food, repairing clothing, and keeping watch. Their shelter isn't luxurious. Maybe it's made from animal hides, branches, bones, and whatever materials the landscape provides. At the center is their most valuable resource, fire. It provides warmth. It provides light. It helps cook food. It can help people process materials. And it can provide some protection from the darkness outside. Then, someone wakes up. The glowing coals are cold. The fire has gone out. At first, it might not seem like a big deal. Maybe there's still some warmth left inside the shelter. But as the minutes pass, the temperature drops. The family now has a problem. And here's where things get serious. They can't just run to the store and buy another fire starter. They need to create fire again. The Ice Age wasn't one giant freezer covering the entire planet. Climate varied enormously depending on location and time. But in the coldest regions and during harsh winter conditions, survival could be brutal. And cold doesn't need to look dramatic to be dangerous. Your body is constantly producing heat. If you lose heat faster than you can replace it, your core temperature begins to fall. Your hands become harder to use. Your movements become slower. Your thinking can become impaired. And that's a serious problem when your survival depends on making good decisions. Now imagine trying to start a fire while your fingers are numb. That's the nightmare. Because fire isn't just warmth. Fire is time. Every minute without it means more body heat being lost. So the family can't simply sit around and hope things improve. They need to act. Someone has to find dry fuel. That sounds easy until you remember that everything outside may be covered in snow, frost, or moisture. The family would need suitable tinder and fuel. Small, dry materials could help catch an initial spark or ember. Larger pieces of wood could keep the fire going once established. And this is where ancient knowledge becomes incredibly important. A modern person might look at a forest and see wood. An experienced Ice Age hunter-gatherer would see something completely different. They would recognize which materials burn well, which ones are dry, where shelter might protect fuel from moisture, and what could potentially be used to start or maintain fire. Their landscape was their hardware store. Their knowledge was their survival manual. And that knowledge was passed from generation to generation. Here's something many people get wrong. Ancient humans didn't necessarily have one single universal method of making fire. Different groups, places, and time periods used different technologies. Depending on the period, people could use methods involving sparks, friction, or other techniques. And fire making wasn't necessarily something you mastered in 5 minutes. It required practice, patience, and the right materials. Think about that. You don't just walk outside, rub two random sticks together, and suddenly, boom, campfire. That's Hollywood. Real fire-making can be frustrating. The materials have to cooperate. The tinder has to catch. The ember has to be protected. And then that tiny ember has to be transformed into an actual flame. One mistake, and you're back to square one. So while one person works on the fire, the others have another job. Protect the family from the cold. Here's the surprising part. Their survival didn't depend on fire alone. Humans themselves were the technology. Ancient people had clothing. They had shelters. They had animal hides and other insulating materials. They could use their environment intelligently, and families could stay close together. This matters because insulation works by slowing heat loss. A good shelter can block wind. Clothing can trap warm air around the body. Animal skins and other materials could provide valuable protection against cold conditions. So, if the fire went out, the family wasn't automatically doomed, but the situation had become much more dangerous. They had to conserve heat, stay protected from wind, avoid unnecessary exposure, and get that fire going again. This is where we need to throw out another common belief. Ice Age humans weren't simply helpless cavemen stumbling around in the snow. They were highly adaptable. They survived because they understood their environment. And in some ways, they had something we often take for granted today: deep practical knowledge. Now imagine the most vulnerable members of the group, children. An adult might tolerate cold better than a small child, depending on the circumstances. So keeping children warm would be incredibly important. The family could use shelter, clothing, body heat, and careful positioning to reduce heat loss. Everyone would have a role. Someone gathers fuel. Someone works on the fire. Someone stays with the children. Someone may monitor the surroundings. This isn't one hero saving everyone. It's teamwork. And that's another reason ancient humans survived. They didn't survive alone. They survived as groups. A successful family wasn't just a collection of individuals. It was a survival system. Everyone's actions affected everyone else. If one person failed to prepare, the whole group could pay the price. Now imagine the fire still hasn't returned. The shelter is dark. The wind is howling outside. And somewhere beyond the entrance, there could be predators. This is where fear becomes part of the story. Because darkness changes everything. Without fire, visibility is limited. Movement outside becomes difficult to interpret. A sound in the snow could be the wind. It could be an animal, or it could be nothing. But you don't know. And when you live in an environment where mistakes can be deadly, uncertainty itself becomes dangerous. The family has to stay alert. But they also have to conserve energy, because every calorie matters. Every piece of fuel matters. Every warm layer matters. And that tiny flame they're trying to create, suddenly it seems incredibly valuable. Then, finally, a tiny glow appears. Maybe it's barely visible. A small ember. That's it. No roaring flames. Just a little red point in the darkness. But now the entire family knows. This could work. The tinder begins to catch. Smoke rises. A tiny flame appears. And suddenly, the darkness looks different. The family carefully feeds it. Small fuel first, then larger pieces. The flame grows. Warmth slowly return. The children move closer. The adults relax just a little. Food can be prepared. Clothing can be dried. The shelter becomes warmer. And that tiny fire has just brought the family something incredibly important. Another night. So what happened if an Ice Age family lost its fire? The answer isn't simply, they froze. And it isn't, they magically made another fire. The real answer is much more interesting. They relied on layers of survival technology: fire, shelter, clothing, food, knowledge, teamwork, and preparation. Fire was incredibly valuable, but it was only one part of a much bigger system. And this is perhaps the biggest lesson from Ice Age humans. They didn't survive because they were stronger than nature. They survived because they learned how to work with it. They observed the landscape. They learned from previous generations. They prepared for danger before it arrived. And when something went wrong, they adapted. Today, if our heating stops working, we complain. If the electricity goes out, we reach for our phones. If we're hungry, we open the refrigerator. If we're cold, we turn up the thermostat. But thousands of years ago, there was no backup system. There was only what you knew, what you carried, and what you could build. For an Ice Age family, a fire wasn't just a source of warmth. It was food, light, comfort, protection, and survival. So the next time you sit beside a warm fire, remember this. For ancient humans, that little flame wasn't just burning wood. It was keeping an entire family alive. And if that flame disappeared, they couldn't afford to simply say, "We'll deal with it tomorrow." Because in the Ice Age, tomorrow was never guaranteed.